Steam navigation. Early experiments. Symington's boat. Colonel John Stevens' screw propeller rocked. Fulton and the Clermont. First trip to sea by Stevens. Phoenix Savannah, the first steam vessel to cross the ocean. Ericsson's screw propeller. The Great Eastern. The whaleback steamers. Ocean Greyhounds. The Oceanic, largest steamship in the world. The Turbinia. Fulton's demo logos. First war vessel. The Turret Monitor. Modern battleships and torpedo boats. Holland's submarine boat. The application of steam for the propulsion of boats engaged the attention of inventors along with the very earliest development of the steam engine itself. Blasco de Garay in 1543, the Marquis of Worcester in 1655, Savary in 1698, Denis Papin in 1707, Dr. John Allen in 1730, Jonathan Hulls in 1737, Bernoulli and Jean Voys in 1757, William Henry of Pennsylvania in 1763, Count d'Auxerre and M. Perrier in 1774, the Marquis de Jouffroy in 1781, James Rumsey on the Potomac in 1782, Benjamin Franklin and Oliver Evans in 1786 and 1789, John Fitch in 1786, and also again in 1796, and William Symington in 1788–89 were the early experimenters. Papin's boat was said to have been used on the Fulda at Cassel, and was reported to have been destroyed by bargemen, who feared that it would deprive them of a livelihood. Allen, Rumsey, Franklin, and Evans 1786 proposed to employ a backwardly discharged column of water issuing from a pump. Jonathan Hulls and Oliver Evans 1789 had stern wheels. Bernoulli, Jean Voys, and the Marquis de Jouffroy used paddles on the duck's foot principle, which closed when dragged forward, and expanded when pushed to the rear. Fitch's first boat employed a system of paddles suspended by their handles from cranks, which, in revolving, gave the paddles a motion simulating that which the Indian imparts to his paddle. Symington's boat of 1788. Patrick Miller's pleasure boat had side paddle wheels. Symington's next boat, built in 1789, and also owned by Patrick Miller, was of the catamaran type, i.e. it had two parallel hulls with paddle wheels between them. Such was the state of this art when the 19th century commenced its wonderful record. No practical steam vessel had been constructed, as the efforts in this direction were handicapped by the crudeness of all the arts, and were to be regarded as experiments only, most of which had to be abandoned. The seed of this invention, however, had been sown in the fertile soil of genius. Conception of its great possibilities had fired the zeal of the inventors in this field, and the new century was shortly to number among its great resources a practical and efficient steamboat. The first steamboat of the 19th century was the Charlotte Dundas, built by William Symington in 1801, and used on the Forth and Clyde Canal in 1802. She had a double-acting Watt engine, which transmitted power by a connecting rod to a crank on the paddle wheel shaft. The boat had a single paddle wheel in the middle near the stern, and was intended only for canal use, in the place of horses. It was abandoned for fear of washing the banks. In 1807 Robert Fulton built the Clermont, and permanently established steam navigation on the Hudson River between New York and Albany. Fulton in 1802 to 1803, while living in Paris with Mr. Joel Barlow, and with the aid and encouragement of Chancellor Livingston, of New Jersey, had built an earlier steamboat 86 feet long, and although it broke down owing to defects in the strength of the hull, he was so encouraged that he ordered Messrs. Boulton and Watt, of England, to send to America a new steam engine, and upon his return to America he built the Clermont. This vessel, although not the first steamboat, was nevertheless the first to make a voyage of any considerable length, and to run regularly and continuously for practical purposes, and Fulton was the first inventor in this field whose labors were not to be classed as an abandoned experiment. The Clermont as originally built was quite a different looking boat from that usually given in the histories. A model of the original construction is to be found in the National Museum at Washington. In the winter of 1807-8 she was remodeled as shown in Fig. 108. She then appeared as a side wheel steamer, whose wheels were provided with outer guards and enclosed in side wheel houses, and whose shaft had outer bearings in the guards, which were not in the original boat. The hull was 133 feet long, 18 feet beam, and 7 feet depth. The Clermont's engines were coupled to the crankshaft by a bell crank, and the paddle wheel shaft was separated from the crankshaft, but connected with it by gearing. The cylinders were 24 inches in diameter, and 4-foot stroke. The paddle wheels had buckets 4 feet long with a dip of 2 feet. She made the first trip from New York to Albany of 150 miles in 32 hours, and returned in 30 hours, which was the first voyage of any considerable length ever made by steam power. The honor of inventing the steamboat has been claimed for many inventors, and that many worthy experimenters had been working in this field, and that Fulton had the benefit of their experience is true. The fact is, however, that the evolution of any great invention is a slow and cumulative process, the product of many minds, and while the proposers, suggestors, and experimenters are entitled to their share of the credit, it is the man who achieves success and gives to the public the benefit of his labors whom the world honors, and in this connection the name of Fulton stands preeminent, for although the Clermont was 264 years later than the steamboat of Blasco de Garay, the Clermont marks the beginning of practical steam navigation, and whatever the claims of other inventors may be, it is certain that steam navigation, established by Fulton in 1807, on the Hudson, preceded the practical use of the steamboat in any other country by at least 5 years, for it was not until 1812 that Henry Bell, of Scotland, built the Comet, that plied between Glasgow and Greenock, on the Clyde, and not until 1814 was a steam packet used for hire on the Thames in England. At the same time that Fulton was in Paris making his first experiments with the steamboat, Colonel John Stevens, the most celebrated boat builder and engineer of his day, was actively experimenting in America in the same line. Having in 1804 made the first application of steam to the screw propeller, he in 1807 built the Phoenix, which was driven by paddle wheels. The Phoenix was constructed shortly after Fulton's boat, but was barred from use on the Hudson by the exclusive monopoly obtained by Fulton and Livingston from the state legislature, and she was accordingly taken from New York to Philadelphia by sea, which was the first ocean voyage by a steam vessel. The first steamboat on the Mississippi was the Orleans, of 100 tons, built at Pittsburgh by Fulton and Livingston in 1811. She had a stern wheel, and went from Pittsburgh to New Orleans in 14 days. Although the first trip out to sea was made in 1808 by Colonel Stevens' son in taking the Phoenix from New York to Philadelphia, no attempt had been made to cross the ocean until 1819. In this year the Savannah, an American steamer of 380 tons, performed this feat, and had the honor of being the first steam vessel to cross the Atlantic. In 1824 the Enterprise, an English steamer, rounded the Cape of Good Hope and went to India. Sidewheel steamers for inland waters, and screw propellers for sea service, however, in time established their fitness for their respective scenes of action. In sidewheel steamers the most notable improvements have been in stiffening the hull by braces, and the adoption of feathering paddle wheels, whose function is to cause the paddles to enter and leave the water in vertical position without dragging dead water. Manley in 1862, and Morgan in 1875, patented practical forms of the feathering paddle wheel. In screw propellers, Woodcroft in 1832, and Griffiths at a later period, made valuable improvements. The surface condenser was used by Hall in 1838 on the steamship Wilberforce, and Sickles in 1841 invented the drop cut-off. In 1854 the Great Eastern was begun and was finished in 1858. This was the largest steam vessel ever built up to this time, and has continued to hold the record for size up to the year 1899, when her dimensions were exceeded by the Oceanic, which ships are put in comparison in Fig. 111. The length of the Great Eastern was 692 feet, beam 83 feet, depth 5712 feet, draft 2512 feet, displacement 27,000 tons, and speed 12 knots. She was designed by the English engineer Brunel, and was intended for the Australian trade. She had both a screw propeller and paddle wheels at the side, with 4 engines coupled to each. The paddle wheel engines had steam cylinders 74 inches in diameter, with 14-foot stroke, and those of the screw engines were 84 inches in diameter and 4-foot stroke. Collectively they were of 10,000 horsepower. The paddle wheels were 56 feet in diameter, and the screw propeller 24 feet. On her first voyage to New York, across the Atlantic, in 1860, she carried from 15 to 24 pounds of steam and consumed 2,877 tons of coal. Her cost was $3,831,520. This mammoth vessel was too large and unwieldy for the uses for which she was designed, and proved a bad investment. She served, however, a most useful purpose, by virtue of her great bulk, steadiness, and carrying capacity, for relaying the Atlantic cable in 1866, and others in 1873 to 1874. In 1874 the Castalia was built. This was a steamer with 2 parallel hulls, decked across, and designed for greater steadiness in crossing the English Channel. The Bessemer steamer, designed for the same purpose, and built about the same time, had 4 paddle wheels, and the entire cabin was hung on pivots, so that it could not partake of the sea motion. In later years great improvements have been made in reducing the weight of the engines, in forced blast, steam steering gear, anchor hoisting devices, watertight bulkheads, surface condensers, electric lights, and signaling devices. By the year 1880 the standard form of marine engine for large powers had become the compound double-cylinder type, expanding steam from an initial pressure as high as 90 pounds. In 1890 triple expansion engines had become common, employing 3 cylinders, and using steam with an initial pressure as high as 180 pounds. In 1890 McDougall's whaleback steamers were introduced. See United States Patents number 429,467 and 429,468, June 3, 1890, and number 500,411, June 27, 1893. In no country in the world are such fine examples of sidewheel steamers to be found as in the United States, and in no country are there such splendid reaches of inland waters as theaters for their performances. The Priscilla, of the Fall River Line, plying on Long Island Sound, and the Adirondack, on the Hudson, are fine examples of this type. The Priscilla, which is said to be the largest river boat in the world, is 440 feet 6 inches long and 93 feet breadth over the guards. She is driven by double compound inclined engines, has feathering paddle wheels 35 feet in diameter and 14 feet face, and her speed is over 20 miles an hour. The Adirondack, whose engines and feathering paddle wheel, is 412 feet long and 90 feet breadth over guards. The engines and paddle wheels of the Adirondack are distinctly representative of the modern American sidewheel steamer. The Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse, owned by the North German Lloyd Company, and built in 1897, is shown in Fig. 114, and for 3 years held the record as the fastest steamship afloat. The Kaiser Wilhelm was followed by the Oceanic, in 1899, of the White Star Company, which is the largest ocean steamer ever built, exceeding the proportions of the Great Eastern. Just what the dimensions of the Oceanic mean, as given in the preceding tables, can be best illustrated by the accompanying Fig 115, in which she is juxtaposed with several blocks of large buildings on Broadway, New York, opposite City Hall Park. If the Oceanic were placed on end beside Washington's monument, at the United States Capitol, she would tower 150 feet above the top of the same. An ordinary brick house 4 rooms deep and 3 stories high could be built with its length crosswise in her hull. There is accommodation for 410 first-class passengers, 300 second-class passengers, and 1,000 third-class, and as her crew will number 390, the total number of souls on board, when she carries her full complement, will be 2,100. The latest achievement in marine architecture, however, is the Deutschland, built for the Hamburg American Company. The Deutschland is not quite so large as the Oceanic, but is of higher speed, her maximum speed of 2312 knots an hour exceeding that of any other ocean steamer. The Savannah, the first steam vessel to cross the Atlantic, made the trip in 1819 in 26 days. The Deutschland in her eastward trip September 4, 1900, crossed the Atlantic in 5 days 7 hours and 38 minutes, which is the fastest time on record. The Deutschland is of 35,640 horsepower, her 2 bronze propellers are 23 feet diameter, and weigh 30 tons, and her propeller shafts are 25 inches in diameter. The cranks of her propeller shafts, like those of the Kaiser Wilhelm and the Oceanic, are set according to the Schlick system, to reduce vibration. The Deutschland's engines are seen in Fig 92, and in general appearance the ship resembles the Kaiser Wilhelm. Still larger and possibly swifter steamships are in process of construction, viz. the Kaiser Wilhelm II. by the North German Lloyd Company, and a mammoth unnamed ship by the White Star Line, whose length of 750 feet will exceed all others. It may be interesting to note in familiar terms what these enormous traveling palaces comprehend in equipment. For the safety and comfort of passengers, the great length reduces the pitching, bilge keels prevent rolling, and the Schlick system of cranks neutralizes vibration in the engine. Strong bulkheads, and double bottoms with airtight compartments, impart buoyancy in case of collision. Boilers are placed in separate watertight compartments, so that damage to one does not disable the others. Powerful pumps are arranged to discharge inflowing water, and the best of lifeboats are provided. Spacious dining rooms, promenade decks, drawing rooms, pianos, library, smoking room, staterooms, cabins for children, toilets, baths, medicine stores, a printing office, and electric lights everywhere, furnish every want and satisfy every luxurious taste. The cuisine includes a refrigerating plant, the finest ranges, and provisions galore. It may be interesting to the housewife to see the market list of a modern transatlantic steamer. A specimen is partially represented in the following: 25,450 pounds of fresh meat, 3,250 pounds of fish, 6,370 pounds of game and poultry, 12,715 pounds of bread, 43 barrels of flour, 3,938 pounds of butter, 1,307 pounds of coffee, 2,790 pounds of sugar, 102 pounds of tea, 7,220 pounds of fresh fruit, 1,230 gallons of milk, 26,106 eggs, 29,180 oranges and lemons, 7,033 bottles of mineral water, 1,800 bottles of beer, 2,688 gallons of beer in casks, 1,240 bottles of wine, 630 bottles of champagne, 1,600 heads of lettuce, 800 jars of preserved fruits, and other things in proportion. In the matter of size, the Oceanic surpasses all previous efforts in shipbuilding, but ocean steamers do not reach the highest speed attainable. The Little Turbinia, a 40-ton craft equipped with a compound rotary steam turbine of the Parsons type, has attained a speed of 3234 knots an hour. An even greater speed has recently been attained by the larger boat, Hai Lung, constructed in England for the Chinese government, which vessel was equipped with reciprocating engines, and is credited with having made a run of 1812 knots at an average speed of 35 knots an hour. The highest speed ever attained, however, is by the British torpedo boat Viper, which is 210 feet long, and, like the Turbinia, is equipped with the Parsons steam turbines. In a recent trial, the Viper covered a measured mile at the rate of 37.1 knots, or about 43 miles an hour. In many respects, the most important branch of steam navigation in recent years has been its war vessels. The great navies of the world at the end of 1898 3 ranked as follows: England, 1,557,522 tons, France, 731,629 tons, Russia, 453,899 tons, United States, 303,070 tons, Germany, 299,637 tons, Italy, 286,175 tons, and they all owe their efficiency entirely to steam. The first steam war vessel was built in 1814 by Fulton for the defense of New York Harbor, during the then existing war times. She was known as the Demo Logos Voice of the People, or Fulton I. As shown in the original designs, Fig. 116, she is a double-ender, whose sides were to be 5 feet thick. In her middle was a channelway or well containing a protected paddle wheel 16 feet in diameter, 14 feet wide, and having a dip of 4 feet. A single-cylinder engine turned the paddle wheel on one side, and was balanced by the boiler on the other side. Although intended to have only 20 guns, she was equipped, when finished, with 30 long 32-pounder guns and 2 Columbiad 100-pounders. It was proposed also to have submarine guns suspended from each bow. An engine was also to be used to discharge hot water on the enemy, and a furnace was to be provided for heating the cannonballs red hot. She was 156 feet long, 20 feet deep, and 56 feet broad, and was regarded as a very formidable vessel. Her cost was $278,544. Ironclad floating batteries were first used in 1855 in the Crimean War, and shortly afterward the French built the first sea-going ironclad, Gauloir, followed in 1859 by the British ironclad, Warrior.